It's important to understand that Daniel chapter 12 is a continuation of the particular visitation which Daniel received from an angel in the third year of Cyrus, the king of Persia. Daniel 10:1. The angel seems likely to be Gabriel, though he was not expressed by name in these particular chapters. Gabriel had visited Daniel multiple times beforehand in the book of Daniel. Everything in Daniel chapters 10 through 12 is one continuous vision, and it was the final prophecy given by Daniel, which is recorded for us in the Bible. The prophetic aspect of this visitation begins early in chapter 11. It is speaking to Daniel's burden about what will become of his people in the latter days, as the angel told him it would in 10:14. Most of what is said in Daniel chapter 11 was fulfilled between the time it was given and the second century BC. You can see Alexander the Great's rise and fall spoken of, and then his kingdom being divided into four. It is clear that the two great powers which would emerge within a few generations from this happening would be Syria and Egypt. If you read the chapter carefully, these are who is represented by the king of the north, Syria, and the king of the south, Egypt. The prophecy is given in relation to the land of Israel, which Syria is to the north of and Egypt is to the south of. Chapter 11 eventually leads to the vile king of the north, Antiochus Epiphanes, whom I just spoke about in the message on the 70 weeks of Daniel, where Daniel chapter 9 verses 24 to 27 was analyzed. Considering that what is said in chapter 12 is the very same scene that began in chapter 10. It's different from the visitation in Daniel chapter 9. But chapter 12 is the very same scene that had begun in chapters 10 and 11. And it's the very same discourse from chapter 11 continued. I believe that the things spoken of Antiochus Epiphanes here at some point come to apply to the ultimate Antichrist. I think that Daniel 11, verses 35 and 36 is the likely place where this transition takes place. And the reason I think that takes place here is it seems virtually certain we are at the end of time as chapter 12 begins, where the flow of thought from chapter 11 has not been broken. The connection of chapter 12 verses 2 and 3 with chapter 12 verse 1 makes this rather obvious to me. And chapter 12 verses 2 and 3 are speaking of the resurrection of the dead, obviously. And then what Daniel is told in 12:4 makes it even more obvious that the things just spoken of will not be totally fulfilled until the end of time. We even see in 12:4 a key prophecy of a mass increase in information and travel, which will be a key aspect of life at the end of time. I don't think that anyone living in Daniel's time, or even anyone alive just a few hundred years ago, except maybe they paid really close attention to Bible prophecy, could have possibly guessed how great the flow of information and worldwide travel would have increased by 2023. And who knows how much more these things might yet increase. Look at how much they have increased, especially the knowledge at the common person's disposal in just the past 20 years. I'll also add that I believe the destruction of the Jewish nation and true spiritual authority being dispersed throughout the earth in the place of the authority within the Jewish nation, which was taken away, is what is meant in 12:7 by when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people. All these things shall be finished. It seems that God is basically saying that his established worship will spread and be happening throughout the nations when the end actually arrives. This would then be a reference to the Great Commission, and it would have probably been a shock to the Jewish mind, and I think even a shock at the time to a godly Jewish man like Daniel. And Daniel was in captivity in Babylon, separated. The worship at the temple had been suspended, and Daniel was longing for God's established worship at Jerusalem to occur again, as he was in captivity in Babylon, as many Jews were, and many Jews were in captivity in other places. Daniel's prayer for this suspension of the worship at Jerusalem to end was answered. But there would yet be another destruction of the temple and another exile where things turned out differently, afterwards by God's own design. I think that this would surely correspond to the times of the Gentiles referred to in Luke 21:24. The times of the Gentiles did not end with Israel becoming a nation again in 1948, like many believe, because God's established worship is not centered at Jerusalem. It is in faithful Christian churches throughout the nations. So the return of Israel becoming a nation again in 1948 was not the great event in prophetic history, which the dispensationalists would have us believe that it was, if it was even prophetically significant at all, besides perhaps paving the way for the eventual rebuilding of the temple. I'll also mention that Daniel chapter 12 verses 2 and 3 and Daniel 12:13 established that God taught the resurrection of the dead as clear as day right in the Hebrew scriptures. Yet many, including many Jews, have said otherwise. Many continue to say so until this very day. That is unbelievable.